You're watching Just Press Record. I'm your host, Matt Zeigler, showing you how to play more with your networks of ideas, people, and everywhere they cross over. Back today with a special Oh Snap, Guess What I Saw episode where I invite one prior guest back onto the show just so I can show them a clip that I just so badly needed their take on. So who's with me here today? Now, this is a man whose name, this one T, clearly his parents wanted to put that math in Matthew, one of the only guests so far who I can remind to make it sound sexy before we start. It's the M-A-T-C-A man. Here he is, the Mat Cashman himself. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back, Mat Cashman.
You're amazing. I mean, if for no other reason than to come on the show, that the intros are worth the price of admission right there. Every time.
If you knew how much I've been walking around my house trying to make sure I could say M-A-T-C-H, man, and not revert.
That part is the best.
Yeah, that part's the best. You can take that one home with you.
So
you got to tell me first, the people want to know, where are you now? I mean, you and Brian Portnoy came on. We had this fantastic talk right at the very beginning of the show. And were you guys out there like palling around a little bit in Chicago? Did we make a new friend?
We did. We made a new friend. Immediately after, I think that might have been was that the first episode of Just Press Record that you did?
Now I have to look. I think you were the first official episode. You were the true, I did the accidental episode.
Right.
And then I was talking to Brian and I was like, this thing happened. I need to see if I can make it happen twice.
Yeah.
Will you please do this? And miraculously, you're also at the beginning too, where I kind of told you who each other were and just begged you not to look each other up. You should know.
Yeah.
Now I don't even put the guests. I send two separate invites to them. And I'm like, you
don't
know until you show up who's going to be there.
That's fantastic. I love that too. Yeah. So Brian Portnoy are buddies now. We went out and had dinner together afterwards and met downtown in Lincoln Park in Chicago, which is much closer. But Brian, much closer to his house than to mine. We did not meet exactly halfway. But it's fine. So yeah, we had a wonderful dinner and a connection, and we still remain in contact, and we're supposed to have another dinner at the beginning of this year. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, he's a fantastic dude, and has I think forgotten more about behavioral finance than I will ever learn. Right? I mean, the guy just he's a wealth of knowledge in that space.
And isn't it interesting, the people especially in the finance industry in and around Chicago, just how many different places they can be, how much you can learn and how much you can forget. How crazy is that?
That's amazing. And Brian, he occupies a space that I unless you had told me it existed, I never even would have, having come from the trading side of things, I never even would have thought that you could even do that in finance, right? Do people, are there finance people with actual altruistic leanings out there? It was this was a new thing for me. I thought everyone was just, all they cared about was their P&L, but it's amazing.
It's a pretty amazing thing. And the other thing I love, and this rings true for both of you in the work you're doing, the more you peer into those networks, the more you get to the other people that are around, both you and Brian. I don't know if you've met any of his other Shaping Wealth colleagues yet. Shout out to, Megan and some of the other people who've been on Just Press Record too. Just incredible depth of knowledge, and the sheer altruism of these people and what they're willing to put out in the world speaks volumes.
It is wonderful.
It is a wonderful thing.
I thank you very much for that intro. It was wonderful. And what a great way to be introduced to someone, right? To be on in a show like that where you kind of fully open the kimono as the first thing. It's amazing.
It's very cool. And I didn't expect, I'll say this too, did not expect how much into parenting and life advice and other stuff we were going to go, which was that was huge for me, that you guys were willing to just go there because it was obvious, but you're willing to, bear all and just go hey, here's what's tricky about the behavioral psychology and optionality of raising children.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I mean, that's the thing. We were talking about Chris Abdel-Messiah earlier. He's a perfect example of that, right? Like he does such amazing things in the way that he writes and thinks about. That's one of the things that when I like ended up talking with him eventually, it was during the time after when you and I and Brian had that conversation where I was thinking about that in those terms explicitly instead of kind of implicitly, and then started reading some of the stuff that he was actually writing down and putting out in the internet, right, on Moon Tower. And the way he thinks about it is exactly that, right? It's the optionality of like parenting. It's the optionality of, every single thing that exists. And it's rare to be able to run into people who actually have the same viewpoint in that way and are able to actually like put it out there in the world in the way that it happened on our show, but also in the way that Chris does it like every day.
Yeah, there's something about it, and Chris embodies it uniquely where it's just, it goes through their entire life. It's not just this one thing they understand in a corner of their professional existence or whatever else.
Absolutely.
Super, super cool. So we're going to talk about a clip because that's why I had you here. Now, I wrote down on this card, why did Matt Cashman need to hear this Dave Nadig clip? And I want to emphasize the word need, which I think you're already giving me crap for, but I really feel that way. This is one of those things that it comes out of Dave's mouth and I go, oh man, I got to send this to Matt and get his opinion on this thing because I know he's going to have thoughts. So we're going to play the clip. And then I'm going to invite you to let's talk about it a little. But before the end, I will ask you to guess why I wanted to pick this. But first, I want to talk about it. Producer Jack Forehand, roll the clip for us.
You're giving me credit for being too good a musician, right? So like I'm absolutely a punter and rhythm follower on these kinds of things. But the experience that I had where that was the closest was we played a friend's wedding. And like we did a whole set and it was great. And we played songs people could dance to in the whole 9 yards. But having never played a wedding or an environment like that, we did not count on the sort of asymptotic inebriation level of particularly the sorority girls who were there for the bride. So by the time we'd gotten like 2/3 of the way through our set, they just assumed that this was live band karaoke. And we had hordes of young women coming up demanding that we play songs that we're all in our phones going like, I've never played the song in my life, but it's the same 4 chords as every other song we play. So we'll figure it out. And some of us like literally had not even heard some of these songs before. So we're looking at each other being like, is this in 4/4? What just happened? And it was like my favorite performance experience ever because we had all of these drunk women from the audience coming up and just belting. Some of them were good. Some of them were terrible. But like in terms of reading the audience, I think it's always important to remember anything that you're making that's going to be seen by another human being is co-created, right? You're only a tiny piece of it, right? If you're not in the head of the person who's consuming it at the same time, you're missing the whole point, right? As much as I mostly play music for myself, the act of creation for an audience is very, very different.
All right. So that was from Just Press Record with Dave Nadig, Angie Coley. I mean, we were talking about the premise of that one was we were talking about lessons learned from mosh pits from somebody who is a professional marketer for a living and somebody who does, finance, industry, product development, sales, research, covering all the things.
Right. When
Dave drops that line, well, first off, can you relate to the story? You've played some shows before. You've been in front of some groups of people.
Can I relate to the story? Yes.
Can you relate to that story? Give me
100%.
Matt on stage, maybe not doing bar band karaoke, but you've been on stage taking requests before. You've experienced this.
Do you want me to give you a really good story about?
I need a really good story about that, please.
I went to grad school in Houston at University of Houston, and I was studying saxophone for those people who in a saxophone life. I was playing a jazz gig at a wine bar just outside on downtown Houston. This time in Houston, Jeff Bagwell had just finished playing for the Astros. And this other guy named Ryan Childress who was like an offensive tackle for the Oilers a long time ago. We played 3 sets that night, 3 jazz sets, and it was well past midnight, and I was playing with the guitar player. And we had played, I feel like the real book front to back. We had played every standard was known to man. We were putting our stuff away, and in walks Jeff Bagwell and Childress and their entourage, right? And it's well past midnight, and we're putting all our stuff away, and they are ordering shots of tequila, but like bottles of tequila delivered to their table. And the
As
whole
one
crowd
does
is-
in Houston. As
exactly.
one
They're
does.
very, very rowdy. And one of them has this great idea and says, Freebird, right? And then another one says, like, no, play Sweet Home Alabama. I think one of them's from it, probably.
Sure.
And so I look at John, the guy who I was playing with, and John is putting his guitar away, and he's like, dude, I don't want to play Sweet Home. I'm like, like, I'm cool if we just put it away and go home. And then as we're about to close our cases, Jeff Bagwell comes up and pulls out a wad of $100 bills. And he's like, could y'all just play Sweet Home Alabama for my friends, please? And he's like, you just tell me when to stop. And he starts literally like flipping $100 bills off of the top of this. Keep in mind, I'm a musician and I'm in grad school, right? I have zero money. And he gets to like $1,100 or $1,200. And finally, John just looks at me and goes, I mean, we got to do it now. I'm like, okay, fine. And so he hands us like $1,200, which is probably 5 times what we were making to play the gig. And he opens his guitar case and plugs his guitar in and just goes, boom, boom, in there, boom, in there, boom. And I grabbed a microphone and I was like, I love the gun. And the place went completely bananas. And we ended up playing a whole nother set for them, obviously, at this point. Anyway, it was when I watched this clip, it made me there were a couple of things that it made me think about. One was that story. There's another thing that it made me think about, which is the act of creation and whether or not we're doing it. And how much of it we're doing for ourselves. And how much of it we still do in what we do, what you and I do independently, how much of it we do for ourselves, right? Like, there's this weird mix, I think, when you're an artist. I think it's really upfront in the creation. When you're doing anything for a crowd, how much of it is them enjoying it and how much of it is you producing it. But that exists in what we do also, right? Professionally, like what I do professionally. I do a lot of stuff like this, and I get up on stage and talk about options. And I think part of why I do what I do and part of why I'm good at what I do is because some of that I do for myself, right? Like the act of creating, and maybe it's like a tiny little, there's a little bit of a narcissist in every one of us. And I think that's interesting, right? Like the act of being on stage is about, in some ways, people, watching you do what you do. It's kind of interesting. But the thing that Dave talks about in this is, I think it was twofold for me. One was like the whole making lemonade out of lemons, right? That part I love. And then the other part is the mixture of how much of this is for the audience and how much of it is for me.
It's important because there's the ego stroke aspect of it. Like, I'm on stage. Like, there's a self-aggrandizing whatever thing that comes with being the one on stage and saying, no, I'm the center of attention. But then it's, if I'm the center of attention to truly entertain this room or bring peace to this room, it's not it's not just an ego stroke. It's actually saying like, I want this whole room to have a good night. In your story, when he walks up to the stage with a wad of money, like he said to play it for my friend, right? That's the way he told the story.
For my friends. Yes, friends.
It wasn't even the demand to play it for me. It was like, I want this for them.
For the whole.
How do I get you on board?
Yeah. Yeah. And he knew, I mean, the commoditization of that situation is interesting as well, but yes, play it for my friends.
So how do you think it when you're teaching or you're leading the courses or you're on stage giving a presentation? Do you remind yourself of that? Is that something you actually check in on? This part's for me, but this part's for them?
That's a good question. I don't know that I do. I don't think that I think about that actively while I'm doing it. In many ways, what I do, like the options education part, particularly when I do it in person, has so many elements of the performance aspect that I enjoy so much from music. And that informs and sometimes the style and the substance of what I'm doing.
Hmm.
And so I don't, and it's, when you've been a musician or played music for that long, on stage becomes a natural thing. And so you don't necessarily, I don't think, have to like check in explicitly with yourself when that's happening. You know what I mean?
Yeah, not in the same way. It's like, it's kind of hardwired into you at that point. Like if the audience is all turned off and disengaged, you're going to notice. But otherwise, if they're engaged, it's flowing.
Yeah. Well, and there's that part too, right? Like when you're up there talking about options, it's not exactly the most riveting subject matter. And so you have to find ways to like make it engaging, interesting. Sometimes that happens with the content that I teach, right? I choose to teach it in a specific way. And then other times it happens just with the actual delivery of the content, right? The actual, like, the performance. That is the performative aspect of it. And so, but I never really think about it. Like checking in with myself. It's more just like reading the room kind of vibe.
But before, when you're prepping for something, you're thinking of it then. You're designing the stuff you're going to put into the performance as what you think is going to be the most engaging for the audience you're presenting it to.
Yes. And I mean, let's not kid ourselves. I practice in front of the mirror. You know what I mean?
Because you are a musician of a certain age and era, like if you could have a little cassette deck next to you and tape it so you can play it back, you would probably do that too. If you don't already do a version of that.
Exactly. And put it on a mixtape for my girlfriend in 8th.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's part of the process of the creation of the intentional creation of the thing beforehand, as well as the actual the process of creating it live. Yeah, in both ways, for sure.
It's interesting too, at the beginning of that clip, and it's not cut off, but it's right there at the beginning. Dave makes the comment about that I'm giving him too much credit for his level of musicianship or something. But I think it does speak to, you have to have, number one, you have to have practiced an instrument good enough to at least have the audacity to be on that stage. You have to have been in some type of format before where you've been forced to either like improvise or rumble with this in front of a room, just like with you in the Sweet Home Alabama thing. Like that's probably not a song you're out there practicing, but you've messed around with it and joked about it enough times that you're like, big enough pile of money, I'm willing to risk being made a fool out. But you can't do that with all the practice. You can't do that without caring to put all those hours in.
No, and there's a part of what I do that is built into, right, the options thing that I teach is an outgrowth of me standing on the SIBO floor for 20 years, right? Or 15 years or however long I did it, or picking up phones and talking to people about options all the time, right? Like it's the same. One of them was an act of it was something that I wanted to practice, right? The saxophone was something I followed intentionally. One was something that it was kind of like an outgrowth that ended up being kind of profitable and interesting, and that part you just end up practicing just because you do it every day, but the end result is the same, which is you end up with an accumulation of experiences that inform who you are and your ability to actually like get the message across, as it were, right? When you're like on stage or performing.
I love that. There was another story that it's in the episodes. If you want to hear it, go listen to the full Dave Nadig, Angie Coley conversation. Angie tells this story too, where she's playing in a bar with her band and she's the singer. And it's like, you're well rehearsed. It's all tight and whatever else. And these two guys with horn cases are like, hey, we want to sit in with the band. Always danger. Always danger for anybody who's been in this situation. I feel like this might have been in Texas too. Always danger. But something about the way they're asking and whatever else, and one of the other guys in the band maybe is trying to signal something to her, and she's like, let him do something. We'll do, I think they did Superstition by Stevie Wonder. Takes the bet.
Oh, that's a,
but
wow. Okay.
Maybe at these guys' behest. Well, so it turns out the two guys were an era dependent again. They were the Big Bad Voodoo Daddy horn section.
Oh my God. That's
and amazing. They had just finished another gig. We're looking for a jam session or somewhere to play. Walked into the bar because they heard him playing like R&B and stuff like that. And we're like, can we sit in for a song? And she was like, had I been the stubborn, oh hell no person,
right, you would have missed it.
Never would have had the opportunity to play with these guys and have this like thing that now I wish was recorded.
Well, that's the openness thing, right? Like that part is, and that's such a delicate tightrope to wander down. Is
high risk.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
The mix of risk and reward, the ability for yourself to allow those things to happen, right? When Dave talks about the gig that he was playing, that's the lemonade out of lemons thing, right? That I love, which is like, you know, you never know. And sometimes like someone asks you to play Sweet Home Alabama and it ends up being amazing. Or in this case, someone asks to like sit in, they end up being amazing, right? But I don't know, the older I get, I think maybe the less likely I am to say yes to those situations.
Really? Like to letting the person sit in, or just to the option, the risk that comes with the randomness?
A little bit, I think so. If I'm being truly honest with myself, I feel like maybe I'm less likely for that to happen. I think I'm a little bit more curmudgeonly in that. Like I'm like, eh.
It depends on the setting. I don't want
to go too deep down that.
I feel you, and I also think it depends on the setting. There's certain times where it's appropriate, and you're like, I'll take that risk, and who knows what the other clues are, and it could be in Angie's story too. Like somebody might have already known, like, hey, these guys are not just, you know, two slouches it's not two homeless guys off the street with some horn cases they stole.
I do love the vibe of like the bass player is back there going like,
no, I know who that guy is. Yeah, let them up.
I've seen him. I just saw that guy in Swingers.
Right.
Like, yeah, for sure.
You are so money. But are you so money that you got to tell me, can you guess why I feel like I wrote a couple things down. Can you guess why I felt like I really needed to show you this clip? I'll reveal my answer to you, but I'm just curious. Why do you think?
I mean, my reasoning for it was I think that you were making the connection between just the musicians involved in mathematical pursuits, business pursuits, and all of that stuff. I think that's probably why my first reaction to it. But when I read the card that you said, why does Mat Cashman need to see this clip?
Please read into the pressure.
I immediately was like, oh man, like he's going to use this to point out.
It's like an intervention.
Yeah, exactly. Some sort of shortcoming that I really need to address.
All right, I got to rethink these cards. This is only the second card.
But it is nice. I do kind of want to know now.
All right.
What
All right.
is it?
So,
What-
so
do
what I
like-
literally said is two sides to co-creation. And I said, there's the multiple options, but with the infinite outcomes. And I love this idea of just having a handful of options in front of you, but you still have, for all the risk controls, for all the other things, there's just so many paths that can go, even when you just pick what option you're going to play or what thing you're going to put forward. That you can't own the whole decision tree. You can hedge out some of the things, you can do stuff, but just because I feel
like that.
I literally felt what you felt, where you're like, when you're put into that situation of, I can't control the person sitting in, or now I'm taking a request and this person wants to sing karaoke. And I'm like, you understand, like, I've been here before. You might train wreck this night for you and your friends.
And for everyone, and me, and the
Yeah.
whole bar.
This whole thing gets ruined, and it'll be my fault that it's ruined
Oh yeah.
because I said yes to this one thing.
Because you're the arbiter of, in that situation, you're the arbiter of the medium, as it were. You are the creator at the top of the pyramid.
And
Yeah.
that comes with real risks. And you've sat in that place, I feel like, in so many different seats, but you've chosen to be that arbiter over and over again. And maybe that's the intervention you needed. What do you think about putting yourself in that seat?
I do like the intervention aspect of this.
Maybe that's what the series
wasn't
will
there,
be called.
wasn't there a TV show called Intervention for a while where they
I feel like there
live
was.
interventions?
One of those
Oh,
things that you
God.
find out really fast.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah.
That might not be worth it. Well,
Well,
if
I do, I love the clip. I love the way that he talks about it. I love the aspect of co-creation, which I think is something that can go lots of different. And then I also love, and I said this in the email that I sent back to you after I watched it, is that I love the actual, and I think I used the phrase, the economy of connection that you created around you, which, and I don't mean that in any kind of like commoditized connection way. I mean it in like the actual economy of connection that you've created surrounding you, which is amazing because I don't know, like 10 days ago, Dave and I had an interaction on LinkedIn where I commented on some of the stuff he was doing. He commented on some of the stuff I was doing, and then he reached out to me and was like, hey, I really wanted options and market microstructure, and I'm in a process of trying to educate myself as to more of what's going on right now. Can we have a call? And I was like, yeah, absolutely. And then we got on the call, and like you and I said, we were like got kindred spirit vibes immediately. And he's amazing. But that economy of connection is the thing that drives this whole thing, which is amazing. So I thought it was awesome.
Well, if more people want to get into the Matt Cashman sphere, aura, network, have their own interventions, where's the best place for the people to look you up, find out more about what you're up to these days?
You can find me on LinkedIn. I spend a lot of time on LinkedIn posting and commenting.
Make sure you get it. Matt with one T, Cashman.
Yeah, it's true. I only have one T in my name. There's an interesting story about that, which I'll tell at some other.
All right. Well, when you come back for your third appearance, which I also had to create this short clip series so that I could have people back repeatedly. That was my other. I was like, wait, I can only have them on once? Like, that doesn't feel right.
And like, it could be my third appearance, but my second intervention. Be nice.
Who doesn't love a second intervention? Make sure you go back in those Just Press Record archives, see the Matt Cashman and Brian Portnoy episode, see the Dave Nadig and Angie Coley episode talking about their lessons learned from mosh pits. Thank you so much for joining us. Like, subscribe, all the things below, and we're out. Thanks for joining us. Like, comment, and hey, subscribe below to Cultish Creative on YouTube if you haven't already. As the good compliance people want me to remind you, Matt Zeigler, that's me, is a managing director at Sunpoint Investments. The opinions expressed in this podcast do not necessarily reflect the opinions of Sunpoint Investments. No information on this podcast should be construed as investment advice. Securities discussed in the podcast maybe holdings of clients of Sunpoint Investments. I hope you've been entertained. I hope you found this useful. I hope you talk to a professional before you try any of this stuff at home. And most of all, I hope you've subscribed. Be nice to each other out there. And don't forget, head over to cultishcreative.com and let's make curiosity a habit together. And I'm out.